Oh, I would laugh if I had to call them just for the front two TVs that are like never the issue. I don't remember week to week. No, I'm kidding. I seriously am tapped out by Friday morning. Okay, so last week we went through some of the retouching, not necessarily retouching basics. We didn't really do that. It was just some of the editing stuff, which you guys knew a lot of that stuff. And it was just more so how do we operate within some of the adjustment layers more than anything. That's really what we focused on. So I gave you a worksheet for chapter 4 because it just seemed to make a little bit more sense as far as the content there. So if you did it electronically, and you may already have a folder on there, and I completely bypassed it when I was doing stuff. No. Okay, 10, 11, chapter 4. So if you did that worksheet electronically, oh, never mind, somebody did do it. Forget it. I'll just rename this file.
The Wolf Mind folder.
Yes.
Is not the worksheet. I have the physical worksheet. It's the files.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So just to
That
let you know,
one, that
the
one.
digital files. So
There. Now that's gonna line up fine. Yeah, no, that's just fine.
yep.
Okay, so yeah, so you can submit the worksheet whatever way works best. If you decided to do it on paper, I'll take it.
I do have the worksheet.
And then it took me forever to find the extra effect. So I don't know if you saw it in time or not, because I think it was probably Sunday when Saturday when I got it. So, I mean, regardless, hopefully you were able to do one of the two effects that were out there. And then you can stick them in that folder too on the server. So anything electronically can be dumped on there. And if you have any paper copies, I'll take those. Oh, then did you have any questions from that chapter? Because we are going to talk about a couple of things today. So there's a handful of things that I want to, oh, and you know what? I think I got to print something for you. I will send that off. So there's a handful of things to talk about today. One of the things, we're going to discuss chapter 5, which is the tiniest chapter in the book. I lied. Chapter 11 is the tiniest, but this chapter is the tiniest for me because it doesn't have... And I keep typing the wrong password, you guys. I cannot get my new password down, and we're what, week 7? It's going to be a long rest of the semester if I still can't get my password. So a lot of the content, this is all about working with black and white. So there's a lot of stuff that isn't in this chapter, and more so like techniques of how to convert to black and white or ideas. So I want to give you certain recipes, but also talk about what makes a good black and white, because black and white is not easy. People think it's just a click of a button and a couple of sliders, and it can be that easy, but there's a lot more to look at in black and whites, so we want to discuss that. So we'll get to that, but what I want to do is first discuss some of the things we have coming up. So what we're going to have is we have a midterm that's not right this second. This is a take-home test that I have for you, and I have 2 parts to it. So I have the actual exam portion, and then I have a practical piece for you. So these are just due by next week. This is like an assignment essentially. So I just want to walk through what you're going to do for those. We also have a project for the end of the semester that I want to talk about. So this project I give to you now because it takes a little bit of thought to figure out what you want to do for this project. And then there's just a couple of pieces that you do along the way. So I want to make sure that we outline that and go through that and figure out and kind of give you some ideas and stuff like that of things that you can do. And then we'll talk about our black and white stuff last. So let's see. Let's do the midterm stuff first. That's a good discussion to have first. So you're going to see in the folder for this week, you'll see the actual midterm exam that you can take whenever you want. That part is pretty straightforward. It's some multiple choice type stuff. There's a couple of screenshots along the way with identifying a few things, mostly camera raw related stuff where there would be screenshots. But it's all like a multiple choice true false type of a deal. And there are, how many questions? 15, I believe. Yes, there are 15 questions for this portion of it. And for that, just take it with you. That's all you have to do. So that I don't have to explain too much about. But then, oops, I need to get you this link. Then it's the practical piece, and that's the part I just kind of want to walk you through. I'm going to print this and give this to you because I'm not giving it to you as an electronic copy, but I'm going to give you the step-by-steps because it is just a follow these steps type of a practical. So I have the images for you that you will copy with you before you leave. And let me... Why do I not have... Here, I'll just stick them. 18. I'm going to stick them on the server right now so that you have those images. I need to download this entire folder. Let me just download and copy it to the server. So I'll walk through what you have to do for these files. What you have to do is, the first part has to do with raw files. So I have 2 raw images for you. They're just different pose, basically the same image. And then you're going to do very much like what you've been doing for your assignments. So you're going to take a snapshot of the before picture before you do anything on the first image. And then there is, if I can, oh, it hasn't downloaded yet. Okay. And then in this picture, there is a red flower. This is driving me nuts because I know that I have these images for you. Seriously. I must have taken them off the server because I didn't want them all sitting there. Come on, download. Still says zipping the file. It's not that big. All right, it's just going to be that slow. Okay, so it is an image. It's a portrait image, and she's wearing a red flower in her hair. I'll show you once it downloads. And then what you want to do is you want to adjust the red flower to be more of a magenta color because it didn't photograph properly. Then, I don't understand. One file zipped. Is it gonna download? What's going on? This is irritating. All right. If you're gonna be difficult, then I'm just gonna have to do it the long way. Okay. And now my downloads folder disappeared. Isn't that nice? They did something to our computers. So frustrating. Sorry, hold on. We'll get it. And digital editing. Oops, I went too far. There we go. But now you do have to take a copy of these images because you can't open them from the server and work on them. So in our class folder, I made a folder for next week for the midterm where you'll turn in these files. There's a midterm images folder. Copy that to your desktop or hard drive or whatever. And then from there, open them up and do the edits. Because what you're going to find is you're going to find 3 images. 2 images that are similar as far as being the same person. And then in step 1, you're going to take this first image. You're going to edit following these steps. So you're going to do the red flower, just make it a little bit more magenta. Then you're going to take, my mouse is out of control. Then you're going to take a snapshot and call it magenta flower. And then anything else that you see needs to be fixed on this image, it could be tonal adjustments, basic panel adjustments, anything like that that you see just needs to be done to it because it's a little off. So just make any other adjustments that you feel necessary. And then you're going to take a snapshot and you're going to title it after. So it'll be the final adjustments. Then what you're going to do is you're going to have to sync all those adjustments that you made to the second image. So image number 2 is going to get those same adjustments. I can guarantee you're going to think it's a little off compared to the first one. And it could just be the background's a little bit different, so those adjustments look a little bit different on that image. Just her placement and the light placement is a little bit different too. So there's a chance you're going to look at that and go, I don't really like that, the way it looks once you copy the adjustments. Don't worry, just leave it. I just need to know that you can sync the adjustments. So don't worry about it. Then what I would like you to do is I would much rather you just create the DNG file, but you do have the option of just clicking done. But you have to remember that there is an XMP file now when you click the done button. So when you turn it in, if you do it that way, you need to have the CR2 file and the XMP file in order for the adjustments to show. Otherwise, just save the images as a DNG and everything will be there. So either way you do it is fine. Just don't forget the XMP if you choose the first option. But that's all you have to do with that one. So it's not really a big thing. Now the second one is more of kind of like following a tutorial is what you're going to do. So you're going to take this image right here and you're going to apply kind of a vintage effect to that image. So I have the step-by-step of what you have to do. The big thing is to make sure that you're using adjustment layers for everything, that you are labeling everything, because you will get points deducted if you don't label your layers, because we should be in that habit, so I shouldn't even have to remind you. But you will do all of these steps. So first step's just a high pass filter, then doing a layer mask to exclude it from the skin. Then you're going to use layer adjustments for all of these. So you're going to add contrast, and I kept them somewhat vague to give you some flexibility in what you use, and trying to make sure that if you need to add contrast, you know how to do that. So I have a few screenshots to do a few parts of the effect, but for the most part, you are kind of have a little bit of freedom there. So you're just adding contrast using either a level or curves adjustment, whatever you're most comfortable with for that. Then for this one, you are going to use the curves, and I took a screenshot of what it should look like. You have to adjust the overall luminance, RGB, and the individual color channels, the red, the green, and the blue. So I took a screenshot of the overall because you can see the adjustments. They're pretty much almost identical S-curves between each of the adjustment channels. So that's what you have to do with the curves on that image. So you'll have to go into the individual adjustment channels for that. Then on top of the levels adjustment, I should probably, I'm gonna rename this on top of the contrast, because you might use a curves for that one. On top of the contrast adjustment layer, you're going to create a layer that you fill with magenta. I put the RGB value to make it easier for you. Then you're going to change the blend mode, change the opacity, and then above that sharpen layer, which is that high pass layer that you create, you're going to do a hue saturation, and I have some settings there for it, and your image should be done after that. So this is roughly what it's going to look like. Here's the before, here's the after. So it's going to have a much more pinkish look to it, a little bit more matted look to it, and then with the adjustment, the little color shift. So that's roughly what that image will look like after. You're going to turn in a PSD file because I have to see all those layers. So make sure you turn in the PSD, and then when you come in next week, you will submit that PSD and then these two raw files, either in DNG format or in the original CR2 with those XMP files. But that is what you need to, that's what you need to do. So I will print this off because it's obviously easier to see the step-by-step as you're doing it.
So the practical and then the test.
Yes.
Right?
Yep,
Okay.
so there's two pieces. There's
Okay.
the written part and the practical part.
Okay.
Both are worth 15 points each, so 30 points total. Thought there was one more thing I had to tell you there. There was, and I forgot. Darn it. Okay, I'm going to print this before I do anything else. Not on, let's print it this way so that it still did it. All right. Lettuce sheet of paper, 2, 4, 6. That's what it was. I'm going to give you this paper copy. You will give me this paper copy back. I don't care if you write on it, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But you will give that paper copy back to me when you hand in your practical next week. So don't lose the paper copy I'm about to print off for you, because you will turn it back in. It's also for just not having the midterm exam floating around. So in order to get points for your exam, I need to have this paper back. Duplex, long edge. And then those that I'm recording it for, I will just have to meet up with you in one of your other classes and get you a copy of it. Okay, which half of them I have in 2 hours, so that works. So does that make sense, what you're doing for that part? I don't think that's too bad. Just do not forget to copy the images off the server. So make sure you do that today.
Copy it to the desktop?
Copy to the desktop, your hard drive. Yeah, it depends on where you're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you plan on just working on it here, just make a copy on the desktop before you do anything, or your hard drive. And if you're taking it home to do it, copy that folder before you leave today. Okie dokie. So that's the practical piece. Exam and practical. Turn this off so you don't see all the... There we go. Now I see what you see. Okay, if you've got the handle on that, we're good. Now I can explain this editing project that you're going to do. So I know I'm throwing it all at you in the same week. However, this is not due next week, like the midterm. This is due week 14. So the second last week of class is when this will be due.
It says part 1 is due 14 and part 2 is 15.
Is 15, yes. Yes. So the first part is more so like the technique itself and turning in the pieces of it. Part 2 is going to be the actual presentation of it. So you're just turning it in the week before just to make sure everything's set and then it's working once you get it onto the server, if there's any specific files that have to go with it. So that's why we're turning it in week 14. Now, there is one piece that you do prior to that, and that's just getting your idea set, and then you're just going to post it in Blackboard. So let's talk about what you're going to do first, and then kind of the steps to get it completed. So what I want you to do is think of an area of photography you're interested in, which most of you have made that identification, probably in another class already, and then think of issues that you have post-production. For me personally, I have an issue of my backgrounds are not wide enough, and it drives me crazy. So I constantly have to extend backgrounds. That's my biggest post-production problem, and that's what takes me the longest when it comes to creating proofs. Yours might be different. Yours is going to be different based on your area of photography. Maybe you do a lot of landscape stuff and you come across certain issues there. Maybe it's focal issues that you have problems with. So what we want you to do is think of that issue and then do a little bit of research on ways to post-production, maybe speed up that process, maybe a technique that makes that process easier to fix. And you're basically going to create a tutorial and demonstration on how to fix that problem. And you're going to present it to the class. It's kind of cool to share these things out because I find that is always more than one person in every class that has the same issue. So it's nice to kind of share those tidbits of editing information. So that's basically the project, is you're going to put together a tutorial. You are going to share it with the class. And, I lied when I said when I said part 1 and the date that it's due and what you're doing. So you're going to present it week 14. Sorry, I was mixing up what you're doing here. You're going to present it in week 14. And then what you're going to do is take 2 of the tutorials completed by someone else in class. You're going to choose 2 of them, and you're going to use the tutorial that they put together, and then you're going to follow it and do it. And it's going to be a true test on when you put together your tutorial, did you have enough information? Did you have maybe screenshots where they were needed? That kind of stuff. So that's where the 2 pieces are. The first part's going to be the actual demonstration of it. The second part is going to be actually doing that of somebody else's presentation. So when you put your stuff together, first come up with the idea. Research a little bit, maybe watch a couple of YouTube videos, find a couple of websites with typed out stuff and a video. They usually have both. And choose one, because there might be a couple different ways to solve the problem that you have. And then choose the one that you think works best. Then you're going to post what your idea is. Luckily, this is a small class because no 2 people can do the same thing. So the sooner you make your decision, the better, because if, like I said, there's usually multiple people who want to do the same area of photography, and if they steal your post-production technique, you have to come up with something else. So as soon as you have decided on what you want to do, you're actually going to post it. It's in the chapter summaries. So in all of these chapter summaries, at the very bottom is the editing presentation. This is the only one that other people can see. All of your chapter summaries and stuff, only you and I can see them. This is the only one that when somebody posts, the rest of the class can see. It's kind of like a discussion board, even though this is set up like a blog. So you're going to post your idea in here, just like you do your chapter summaries. But all you have to do is post your idea. That's all. You don't really have to have any additional information in there. You can choose to put a link to it if you want, because maybe somebody's choosing something similar, but your process is different. That's totally up to you, but you don't have to. Just give a very brief description on what it is. Then you'll be able to see all the blog posts of everyone else in the index. So as you post your stuff, just make sure no one else has taken it. So the sooner, the better. Now, if you don't post, if you choose to be a procrastinator, and week 13 you start working on your project, and then you decide on what you're doing and you post it, you will lose points on your project. Or if you forget completely, you're going to lose 5 points on your overall project. So you need to make sure that you have that done sooner than later. I would recommend in the next 2 weeks getting that posted. But once you have it posted and you know no one else is taking it, then what you have to do is after you make that post, you're going to just master that technique. So I always say just do it several times on several different images to make sure that technique is versatile, because it might work on one, but if it doesn't work on the other and you want that to be something that you can use across the board, it might not be a good technique. But the more you practice it, the easier it's going to be as you develop your tutorial. So your job is that once you kind of master it, maybe tweak, because we always tweak things. I mean, you followed enough tutorials to know that it doesn't work perfectly on every image, so you find you have to tweak it, maybe based on how you edit or something. So practice that. Create a tutorial. So you're going to basically create a handout. And we're going to, in the end, I'm going to have a spot for you to upload it in Blackboard, just because we have a section of 3 students that have to take this through independent study, so I record it for them, and for you guys to go back and listen to, but so they have to do it that way. So to share that information with them, we're going to post that to Blackboard. Now, the weird thing is, and I might have to change this to be honest, because they're technically in a separate class. So even if we post it, they can't get to the discussion board. So I might have to, as we get closer, I'll have to kind of figure out a better way to do that. Maybe we will just have to put it all on the server, and then everyone can just we'll have like a tutorial folder or something, and then you can just grab it from there. I might have to change that a little bit. But either way, we're going to share our handouts between the people that aren't here and the people that are here so that you can choose. Now, the people that aren't here, what they're going to do is they're going to record their tutorial, much like I do the ones for class where I just use QuickTime and record it. I will walk you guys through that aren't here. I will walk you through how to do that recording. And then by week 14, their recording will be done and in the server so that we will play those in class so you can see their tutorial. And then I will be recording your tutorials for them so that everyone sees everybody's. Then that handout will be used after you demonstrate. So you're going to walk through and just kind of explain the problem you have, what this technique does to solve that problem for you, and then walk through the steps. The big thing is to understand the why behind what you're doing. It's not just, then you click this button, then you click this button. Like, that should not be your tutorial, because we could just follow the sheet and that would be fine. But what you want to do when you present it is, we're clicking this because we're missing this here. So if we use the transform tool and pull it to the right, it extends our background a little bit without looking too distorted. So like, you want to explain the why behind what you're doing with your steps. That's the biggest part of the presentation, is being able to explain that. So that's why you have so much time. Yay. And then do whatever demonstrations you need. Now, I have had some people in the past pick something where it had some pretty intense editing as far as a setup. Like, it was a pretty long process. I don't want this to be like a half-hour presentation for people. Figure like 5, maybe 10 minutes for what you're presenting. It's not, and I'm not going to sit and time it either, but it shouldn't take a minute to do your presentation. That you've probably picked a technique that's too easy, or maybe you didn't explain it good enough when you present it. I would say roughly 5 minutes is what you're going to be at. But if you have something that's intense, like someone last semester wanted to do an easy way to do star trails, or just quicken up the process of doing star trails. So we found some pretty good tutorials on how to make that process a little bit quicker. And it was a lot of waiting for the computer to process. So what he did is he had it all typed up on his sheet of paper, but he only demonstrated the second piece. And so that way we didn't have to sit and wait for the process. So he showed us on one image how it was processed and said, then you have to do it to like your 40 some images and sit there and wait. And he had it all done already by the time he presented. So he opened up those processed files then and then demonstrated the rest of the tutorial. So if you choose something where you have that kind of a situation, it's fine for you not to demonstrate the whole thing. Just kind of explain to us, here's what has to be done ahead of time. I have it done so I can show you, and then walk through the rest of it. Totally cool to do that. And then as we get further along, now one of the last things that we talk about is automation. Some of the things you might choose would be perfect for an action. And actually that same person discovered that. We found a way to make an action out of his star trails, which was awesome. It wasn't like this tedious process for that second part to begin with, but it was a lot of scrolling and selecting and moving a few things, and we found a way to automate that. And who knew there was a quick key to select all of your layers except the background layer? That was our biggest challenge. We sat in Flex Lab for like an hour, and we finally figured out how to make it work. It was so cool. So if you find that your tutorial would be really good as an automated piece, make it an automated piece, because that one is going to help you, and you can use it as your assignment for automation. So it can be your automation assignment and part of your final project, and it's something you can share with the rest of the class too. So it's kind of a cool thing if it warrants what you chose as an automated process. So that's really what you're going to do. It's nothing like it's this big, huge, massive project, and that's why I'm giving it to you right now, because it's going to take you weeks and weeks and weeks to do it. It's coming up with the idea that probably takes the longest part. So that's why I gave that to you now. I can give you some ideas of what people have done in the past. And I'll kind of get to that in a second. I'll just run through part 2. I've kind of explained it, but I just want to make sure I get to the rubric. And I'll give you a few ideas so that you kind of know. So to finish this up, once you do your presentation, you will choose then the second part of the project is not necessarily anything to do with your presentation. It has to do with the other presentations. So you will choose 2 that someone else demonstrated. You will grab the handout that they created. You will follow those steps. You will do it. And you will submit those files the last week of class. And then following that tutorial that they have created, you get to do an evaluation on that. And that is part of the grade for their project. So you'll see within your own the points and everything between the presentation, the handout, and then actually doing the techniques from somebody else, and then doing the evaluation. So doing the techniques and the evaluation for you alone is 15 points. But then what I do is I average the evaluations that other people fill out on your tutorial, and that becomes 5 points of your overall grade. So their peer evaluation on how easy to follow your tutorial was, that they knew what to expect in the end, what it should look like, maybe a before-after screenshot of your example. Maybe there's certain adjustment layers and you needed to supply maybe a screenshot of what it's supposed to look like so they knew what to do with it. Just things like that. Was it detailed enough? Did they understand it? Could they follow it? And then they will do that evaluation. That evaluation equates to 5 points. I average everyone that did an evaluation on your tutorial, and then whatever that average is the points that you get right there. So you get points for doing it for someone else, and then their evaluations factor into your grade, if that makes any sense whatsoever. So total, it's 50 points for this project. 20 points for your presentation, 10 points for creating your handout, 15 points for doing, following the handouts of 2 other people after you present and turning it in the last week of class, and then doing the evaluation. Does that make sense? Okay. It's not a difficult final project, and I really want you to cater it to you. So there's been a handful of different things that people have done. Like I said, some people have done I had someone do the star trails. I had someone who does a lot with, wants to do a lot more street photography type of stuff, but really wants to eliminate as many people as possible from the photo. There used to be a tutorial in our book, but it was in the previous version of the book, and he took it out of this version, and I was mad, where he had a picture of the bean in Chicago with nobody in the picture. So it was really cool. So it was a technique where you have to have multiple exposures, and then there's several steps to combining those and doing a blend, but then there's a whole statistical extra thing to do to make sure that you have enough contrast and stuff like that. So he wanted to do more of that. So he found a couple different tutorials and decided on one that was a little bit more complex because the result was a lot cooler, and then walked us through some of that. So someone has done that. There was extending the backgrounds. There was someone, like it could be a landscape thing, like I said, where it's not you have problems focusing different areas. So maybe you try a couple different focus stacking techniques. You will do it in specialties class, you will do some focus stacking, but it's kind of cool to look at the variety of different ways to do focus stacking, because there might be a technique that works better than the way we do in class. Like I said, I have to extend backgrounds a lot, so that could be one thing. I made a little list because I knew I'd blank when I was trying to come up. I did have one student in the past. They created snow in Photoshop. They decided to do some compositing. They wanted to do more with composites. So they like to do more eerie, cool-toned composites for what they do for some conceptual stuff. So they created a tutorial on creating snow in Photoshop, because obviously we only have that so many months out of the year. Someone else wanted to do more watercolor painting effects and found a tutorial on how to do some painting in Photoshop. So they walked through that. Sky overlays, if you do landscape and the sky is just not what you want it to be, how to easily swap out skies. There's like 4 different ways to do that. So they found a technique that worked really well and quick for swapping out skies. Star trails, extending backgrounds. A few people did tutorials on creating kind of a mosaic out of several images. Someone did do templated type stuff. They wanted to create a template for Christmas cards for clients. So they came up with the template and made it in a way that was easily swap out images and text through smart objects. So it was a lot of pre-building, but then demonstrating how to use the template is what they did. So they didn't necessarily demonstrate how to create it. They kind of talked through a little bit, but then demonstrated how to use it. So that was pretty cool too. So those are just a few ideas, but really think of some of the things that you do and what you can do, and what would make your life easier if maybe you had a better way of doing it, because you might be doing it the long way right now. You might know how to do it, but is there a faster way to do it? That's one thing to look into if you're having troubles finding something. Think of something you do now and see if you can find a way to do it faster and more efficiently. So hopefully some of those ideas help a little bit. I could dig into last semester's folder too if you're struggling later on and see if I can pull some of the ideas they had. So make it a meaningful tutorial for you personally, but something that solves a problem that you have. You guys have any questions on that? Never know what to do. Okay. All right, that's the project. So the information is there. Every week I'll link to this just so that you don't forget it, that you keep in the back of your head. So I did put to post your idea by week 9, because I said in the next couple of weeks would be ideal for this. You do get points for posting that. So in the chapter summaries, remember, that's where you post the idea. It's not a discussion board type of a deal. It's the chapter summaries. So then week by week, I will just have it. Oops, that didn't have the dates, didn't update on here. I'll have to go in and fix that. I kind of have a little step-by-step for you just to have some deadlines and maybe try and keep you ahead of the game if you're prone to procrastinating. I have a little edit project task list for you, but my dates didn't update and I went in and I did it. So I'll go back and try it again. I don't know why those didn't update, but I'll go back and try it again so that you have your own little checklist, making sure that you're not forgetting anything. If you need to supply students with images to use for this technique, you can. If you feel that no one else is going to have the right pictures for it, you can certainly supply images, but you don't have to. If it's something that you can use any image for, you definitely don't have to supply an image, but some people bring in samples to use. like the Star Trail, he brought in samples because he knew not everyone would have those images. Okay, so if you're good there, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna talk black and white. I put, and I just closed it, that was awesome. I put on the server a file I want you to copy to the desktop and change to black and white. Before we talk about anything, I want to, so in the editing folder, you will see just a random raw file. This one right here. And it's crooked and it hasn't been white balanced or anything. So it's the total raw file. I want you to make that image black and white using whatever method you want. So we can give you like 5 minutes because probably is more than enough time. And I want you to take that image, now copy it to the desktop before you open it. Don't open it from the server. I want you to convert that to black and white using whatever way you want or know how to do. And then I'm going to create a folder on the server, black and white test image. I'm going to create a black and white test image on the server. Stick it in there when you're done. You don't have to stick your name on it, or maybe just change the naming because we're all going to have the same naming structure. But I want to compare what everybody's black and white looks like because it's very interesting to see. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. So take a few minutes. Gosh, my mouse is out of control. Okay, so there's your midterm thing. Let's see, 7. I'm still missing one. All right. Well, we'll go with what we got. I love comparing these. All right. Pause your Pandora. Okay. This is crazy. This is very interesting comparing everyone's black and whites. Whoops. It went too large. I want to get them. What is it doing? Why is it not putting them in columns? I don't understand. It puts them in, whatever. I'll do it that way. So even without looking at these large, check out the difference between everybody's black and white. Now I'm missing one more in here, but
Me?
yeah.
Luis? Is that one you're missing, or?
No, what class are you looking for?
College 101.
That would be, my guess is it's going to be in that room right there, 232. Did you have a room number on your?
In the email it said BT 230.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's strange, because it's never in this room. My guess would be 232. That's usually where it is,
Okay.
if it's around this area.
All
So
right.
that's, yep, the next one.
All right.
So comparing each one is really, really interesting. There's even just comparing, here, let's just compare these two. Check out the difference even between these two. Like looking in the pillar right here, there's a ton of contrast and detail here, and this one's a lot flatter in those areas. So everyone does it a different way, but I'm curious, as I'm kind of flipping through here, like what technique did you use to create your black and whites? Like how did you do it? Anybody? Did you go in Photoshop? Did you do it in RAW? Did you do certain
I did it
layers?
in raw, and I hit the black and white option. And like,
Okay, yep. Did you do anything after that?
And then I hit a couple of filter options, so like contrast, density,
Cool.
and I kind of adjusted it from there.
Good.
Tint, I think it's the other one, temperature, kind of just did that, so,
Nice.
yep.
Yeah, even just looking, I like looking in the pillar where the paint is peeling and stuff like that, just to kind of see details in there. What else did some of you use for converting your image to black and white?
I did it in RAW with the convert to grayscale, and then I messed with my tone curve and did like an S.
Cool.
And then I added clarity and contrast.
Nice. Yay. Did anyone do it right in Photoshop? Did you all use RAW? No way. That's amazing. Did you really all use RAW? That's so cool. Okay, then I don't have to talk much on that end. Holy cow, that's awesome. But it is really interesting just to see the difference between them. I mean, there's such drastic differences. And so it just goes to show you that there isn't one way to make a black and white. And there's some ways that are going to work better for some images than other images. So what I want to do is I want to show you a variety of different ways to convert to black and white. Some, honestly, you're probably never going to use, and that's fine. But knowing that that is a way to maybe make an adjustment to a black and white image is really what I want you to know. There's one of these is, this one. I have this action. Now, I purchased this action, so I can't take any credit for this, but this action is probably one of my favorites for black and white. Not that it's going to be the best on every image, but look at the layers that it creates just to create a black and white. I think the misconception when we do black and whites is that it's going to be a black and white adjustment layer or click the black and white button in RAW and then it's done. When the reality is, a lot of times that produces what's called a muddy black and white. And a muddy black and white is, here, let me get that original image here. Let's just open it as is. I can guarantee this is going to be a muddy black and white. So a muddy black and white is when you create an image in black and white, but in the gray tone areas, like those middle gray tone areas, that middle part of the histogram, that it's just pretty flat. Like there isn't a lot of differentiation between those shades of gray. There might be some good highlights, there might be some good shadows, but everything in the middle is kind of flat. That's what we call a muddy black and white. You might hear that from photographers, or a flat black and white too, but a lot of times we call it muddy, where those middle areas just kind of blend together like mud. And when you create a black and white, you want as much differentiation between those midtones especially. Getting the highlights and shadows is pretty easy, but getting those midtones to really do what you want them to do is probably the trickiest part. So there are some techniques that will work good on certain images and some that will work better on others. And that's why I want to kind of walk you through several different techniques. Your book has a couple. It does focus mainly on raw. So that's why I'm not necessarily going to focus on that part of it, because it seems like a lot of you are using that to convert your black and whites. I want to show you more options that would be available in Photoshop and things that you can do once you convert it to just take it steps further. You're always going to do everything we did in chapter 4 with the adjustment layers. You're usually going to be adding some of those after you create the black and white. So once you get it set and you've played with everything the way you want, you're almost always, probably 99% of the time, you have to add additional adjustment layers to make it look good. So let's walk through some of those steps. Now, if you wanted to follow along and do some of these steps as we do it, it's kind of a cool comparison to take one image and then convert it using all the different conversions that we'll do, and then compare them all next to each other to see what it looks like on the same image. Because it's really crazy how it is so different for every single image. So I did also, here, I have a link that I put in Blackboard, so you'll see it show up now that says black and white conversion notes. So I do have all of these steps on there for you to go back and follow if you want. I'm just going to walk through some of these so that you get the idea. There are a couple, like I said, that are in Camera Raw, but I want to focus more so on the ones that are in Photoshop. Now, when you first learn black and whites, you're probably told convert it to grayscale, but that's the worst way to do it. There's only a few times where you do a straight up grayscale conversion where it looks good. It usually does not look good. There's only a couple times where you're like, oh, that actually is pretty good. But usually it's a hot mess. So I'll just use this image, and I've already done it on this image, but to do a grayscale conversion, usually this is the last step. You often will do all your adjustments, make it black and white, make it look pretty, and then the last step that you do is this, image, mode, and grayscale. So you convert it from an RGB image to a grayscale, and really all you're doing, and again, you'll often do this as the last step, not the first step, but for this example, we'll do it first. Really what you're doing is you're taking all of the color channels and you're wiping them out, is what you're doing. You're just telling Photoshop to get rid of them. Now, if you have your image in black and white already, like through whatever adjustment layers, and then you do this, your image is going to look pretty much the same. So it just wipes out the color channels to only leave the gray. But as a first step, it's like, meh, it's okay. Now I'm just going to keep doing a save as. I'm going to, on my desktop, just create a black and white sample folder. And I'm just going to keep saving a JPEG, and I'm just going to put the type of conversion it is so I know which one is which. Do I want a PSD? Yeah, whatever. It's fine. So this is the first step. Plain, boring, really isn't going to do a whole lot. Maybe with a few other adjustment layers you can get it there, but it's probably going to take more work to start here and then try and edit from there than it would to make this the last step. So Let me go back here. So that's that first one. Very, very limited because you have no control over what colors it's keeping and what it's taking away when it makes that grayscale. Now, desaturate is another one. And nobody said they used desaturate. That made me so happy. This may be the first semester that this has happened. There's always somebody every semester that's like, I just desaturated it. And it's fine, but it's equally as limiting as doing a grayscale conversion. So I'm going to go back to my original color image here. So after I do each one, I'm just going to go back to the original so that I can start with the color image and then make adjustments. But when we do the saturation, what is it doing here? All we're doing is we're adding that hue saturation adjustment layer. This one's easy too. We're adding the hue saturation adjustment layer and then taking the saturation all the way down. That's it. It's probably going to be fairly close to the grayscale conversion. There will be some differences, but it's going to be pretty close. So that's all there is to the desaturate. Not the best method either. Still very limited. So I'm going to save this one. Saturate. Oh my gosh. My fingers aren't working today. There we go. Yeah. I want to get in here. Black and white. Sample. Even just comparing these two. Even just comparing those two, there are enough differences between those two. Desaturate actually was a little bit muddier than grayscale already. Just looking in those shadows and midtones, it's a bit flatter in the desaturate than grayscale. So grayscale has a one-up on this particular image. Your own image is going to be different. But that's all there is to desaturate, not rocket science. Again, you're going to add more adjustment layers on top of this. This is simply taking away the color. That's all these steps are. You are going to do more steps beyond this with all of your images. So those two, very straightforward. Now, this one is one that you might not have done before. You might not have even used this mode before. Has anyone used lab mode for anything? Okay. Lab mode's kind of an interesting mode. We'll actually talk about it in print portfolio today. But lab mode's kind of an interesting mode because when we convert something from RGB to lab mode, we go to image mode and then we go to lab color. And everything is going to look the same. However, our channels palette is what is different. We have now taken red, green, and blue, and we have converted it to a lightness, which is just your overall luminance of the image. And then we have an alpha and a beta channel. So we have an A and a B. And basically the A and the B, I mean, it looks ridiculous alone, but basically one is going to be like your blues and your yellows, and the other is going to be your magentas and your greens. And those two just kind of work together to create the color. Now, I found a tutorial, this is totally off topic, but I found a tutorial and it was a really cool effect. I did it with an image of flowers, and it was so cool. And I can't remember if it was the A or the B channel that I inverted. And you can come up with some cool color effects just by inverting the color of the color channels. Oh my gosh. Okay, that maybe it's this one I should use. Yeah. So if you invert the color channels, it inverts like your magentas or your greens or your blues and your yellows. And it creates cool color effects on your images. I wonder what would happen if I did both of them. Okay, no, I don't like what it does with the alpha channel on this image. But you can create cool color effects with lab mode. That's just what I'm saying. There's actually entire books on lab mode and how to operate in it and do things with it. It's crazy. So it's kind of cool. But using lab mode to do a black and white, what we're doing is we're basically pulling the luminance. So in our channels palette, we do have to go to our channels palette when we use lab mode. In our channels palette, oh yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
How did you get it from that grayscale to make it colored again?
Go in your history palette back to the original image.
Okay, and how did you get it to like the cool looking colors?
So image mode lab color.
Image mode, lab color.
Yeah, so it's not going to look or do anything. This would be if you're just playing around with it.
Playing around with it.
Yeah.
Because right now my scale is gray, and I was wondering how you got it to the.
Did you go back to the original color image before doing lab mode?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
on the-
maybe you clicked on the lightness channel. That's probably what you
I'm
did.
on the original.
Oh no, you're on RGB, so now you gotta go image mode and then lab. So now
Okay.
your channels are different.
Okay.
There they are.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So now to make the black and white with lab, we only want the lightness channel. So clicking this channel will make it a black and white image. This is simply the luminance. Now this method is still limiting in how much control we have because we really don't have any control. However, because it looks at the luminance values more so than anything else, it's going to be a step above your grayscale or desaturation. This mode in the past used to be the go-to for portrait photographers when they did black and white images before the black and white adjustment layer became a thing. This was the go-to because in the lightness channel, it preserved skin tones very well. So this is a good method and is really easy to do because all we have to do here is delete the A and B channel is really all we're doing. You can either just manually delete it or you can just turn your image to grayscale from here and it will just ask to delete the other channels. So either way you do it, it doesn't really matter. You're just keeping the lightness. But this is a good technique if you want to use it to create an action of, so that all you have to do is push a button and it does these steps for you. But if I delete this, this is what is weird. When you delete if you delete the alpha or the beta channel, it changes the naming structure of everything. I don't know why. I don't get it. So if you're manually deleting, you just obviously get rid of the one that's not the one you're viewing, and then you're good to go. And then you would convert it to grayscale or convert it back to RGB if you're going to do some more. Actually, no, I can only go to grayscale. So then I would do a grayscale conversion to actually make it gray to get rid of the weird name channels. If you send it to print and you use lab mode, you will have to convert it to grayscale because printers can't recognize lab mode. Many printers don't recognize lab mode. So you're not able to just leave it like that. You'll get an error. You'll have a problem printing it. So you will have to do image mode grayscale as your last step. So this is just another way, again, preserves the luminance values a little bit better, but still very limiting. So we haven't had anything where we really have a lot of control yet. Lab. There we go. So we haven't done anything where we really have a lot of control. Now some of the adjustments that we're going to do, we're going to have more control over what it is. And some of these I don't need to talk much about. Like the black and white adjustment layer, there's only one thing I want to show you that really makes the adjustment a bit easier, but I think you guys all know how to use it, and it's the same as in Camera Raw. So I'm just going to go back in my history palette quick to get back to the color image. And so for the next technique, I'm going to choose the black and white adjustment layer in Photoshop. And you guys have used this before, right? I'm assuming so. And if you just did it in RAW, it's the same stinking thing. Except for we have one extra button. Okay, first, the big difference between RAW and this, we're missing two sliders. We don't have the orange and we don't have the purple. Those are the two that we have the bonus of using in Camera Raw that we can't use here. So I guess it kind of warrants going to the Camera Raw filter or opening it in RAW and doing it that way. However, this does the same thing. Now, in here we do have some presets. So in this drop-down menu under the, when we're in the properties of the black and white adjustment layer, there are some cool presets that show up in there. Like I could choose a high contrast with a red filter. Maybe the yellow filter would be, oh, I really had higher hopes for the yellow filter. Let's try this one. Man, it's a very neutral picture to begin with, so I'm sure, That's half the problem here. But just some pre-built filters that are in here. Bad black and white. I forgot I saved this. There we go. And then when we talk presets, we'll talk about saving your own presets in here too. So if you have adjustments that work well, you can save them. But there are some that will work better than others. However, what you typically do is you typically just slide the slider and you're like, okay. And then you're guessing. What's working well? What part of the image is it changing? So it becomes a little bit of a power struggle between the sliders and the image if you don't know what color it's affecting, or what the slider, what part of the image that color falls under. So there's this beautiful little tool that's called a targeted action tool. And it's the little pointer finger with the 2 arrows on the sides of it in this properties panel. And this is what's awesome. What it does is lets you pick a color in your image. So if I want to really focus on the ceiling here and make it less muddy, if I pick a spot and I click and start dragging, it will find the color that it needs to adjust for you. So the cyan is the color that I need to adjust to get this ceiling looking a little bit cooler. So I can pick that. I can pick another point and choose that, and it will find the color that it needs to use. I love this button. It takes the guessing game out of everything. So if I, so if I need to adjust his shirt has more reds in it, so I can adjust that. Of course, yes, it is going to adjust everything, but you're not guessing anymore. So that is kind of a cool thing. You could always add multiple adjustment layers, like black and white layers, and mask out the adjustments so that it is only affecting certain ones. That's never a bad idea, but that targeted action tool, that's an awesome, awesome button that you should get to know. So that's what the black and white slider does. That's the only thing different in the black and white slider that you may or may not have known about that I want to point out. Need some more detail here. And with this one especially, I always have to add other adjustments on top of it. Like I'm trying very hard not to add a couple curves layers on top of this right now because I want to complete my black and whites. So I'm going to save this as another one here because that's really all there is to it. It was just the targeted action tool that I wanted to show you. Okay. So that one's straightforward. I think you guys can get that one. I'm not even going to do the camera raw one because you guys just did that. However, what I would do is if you're doing this on an image that you have open in Photoshop already, maybe you needed to do some like taking people out of the picture and all of that stuff. So you have a bunch of layers that you've adjusted. I know you guys have done that before. You're like, oh, now I want to make it black and white. Have we talked about stamping your visible layers yet? I don't think I have. Okay, this is a good thing. Let me do this. Let me just make some adjustments to something really quick. And I want to take out some of the blue. And cyan. And I'm going to do another one. Okay, so let's say I've done this to the image and then maybe I took something out, like, you know, I didn't like this in there, so I decided to take that out. I don't know. Let's put it underneath here. Create my retouch layer. Maybe I took this out, not at 20% because we'll be here all day. Okay, that was really, really bad. I've got a pattern. Okay, so let's say I needed to take that out. So I've done all this adjustment to my image and I'm like, ooh, now I want to make it black and white. What would logically be your next step to make it black and white? What would you do? Nothing. I hope you all drink coffee. I'm buying you coffee next week. Wake up! It's almost 10:30. We should be awake by now. Actually, it's 10 o'clock, not almost 10:30. Depending on your method, you might make it you might flatten it first before you make it black and white. So then you discover after you do that, and then you make it black and white, that, oh my gosh, I screwed something up. And now I don't have my layers because I flattened my image. That is a pain in the butt. So if you want to go into Camera Raw after you have done adjustments in Photoshop, what you want to do is something called Stamp Visible Layers. And there's no easy way to do it except for know the quick key. Because it's not in the menu. So you just have to know the quick key to get that to work. So what you do is you select your top layer because it always stamps above the layer that you have selected. So it's best to select your top layer. And then you hold down a ridiculous set of keys. You hold down the Command, Option, Shift, E for elephant. You hold down those keys, and then what it does is all of your visible layers, it kind of creates like a flattened version of it. So it creates this flattened layer of all the layers that I have visible right now, which is kind of a cool thing. So there are some instances where you may need that, but to go into the Camera Raw filter, if you want all of those adjustments to carry forward, because they're in separate layers, that's the only way I can carry those adjustments without flattening my image. But now I have a flattened image to carry over, and then if I screw something up, I still have the original image to go back to, and it makes it easy to readjust. So then I could go to the Camera Raw filter, and again, make everything as non-destructive as possible. Whoops. Make that a smart object before you go to Camera Raw. So stamp visible layers, convert to smart object. Then from the filter menu, you would go to Camera Raw. So now I can go in there, and now I can do whatever black and white stuff I want to do. And happy day. It probably looks even better than any of the other adjustments you're doing. And I have the orange and the purple slider, which I actually have in my image, so I'm glad I have the sliders. Tone adjustment. Oh, I love using this one over anything, but there are times where Photoshop is necessary. There we go. So that's the only extra step. So you know how to do everything else in the Camera Raw filter. I don't need to go through that. We're good there. But stamp the visible, Command, Option, Shift, E, and then make it a smart object before you do it, so you can always go back and fix it. All right, Raw. Okay, so that's all there is for that one. Now, this next one, I'm going to skip the split toning for just a second and come back to it. I want to show you the gradient map and the channel mixer. Those are the two I really want to make sure I cover if I can't get to anything else. The split toning stuff is actually in your book, so it's okay if we don't get to that, and we've talked about it just a little bit, so it's not necessary. But I love gradient maps. They're so much fun, and they make really good black and whites too. And then the channel mixer is just kind of a fun one that can do different things. So let me go back to my original image here. So a gradient map. Has anyone used a gradient map before? Oh, they're fun for color effects. Okay. I love gradient map for color effects. However, you can do good things with black and white too. So if you have never used a gradient map, it is an adjustment layer, and it is a gradient that overlays on top of your image, but it's based on certain criteria. So it will default to black and white, which is cool because that's what we're doing. However, just to kind of give you an idea of what it does, I'm going to choose a color one. Let's do, and of course these defaults suck. There we go. We're going to make our Christmas tree gradient. Just to show you what it does. This is the sole purpose, is just to show you what it does. What it does is it overlays colors. Think of it as kind of like the split toning when we talked about that. If you remember, back to Camera Raw a bazillion years ago, it seems like, even though it was week 2. What the gradient map does is it takes a gradient of colors and it factors your gradient from highlight to shadow. And it goes based on your histogram. So your shadows are always on your left and your highlights are always on the right. So it basically overlays whatever colors at that portion of the histogram. So right now I only have 2 colors. So anything that falls between this mid-tone point right here where it starts to transition to green down to red, so anything from completely black to just past that middle point here is going to be red. And anything above that point is going to be green. Now if I were to introduce another color and make it, I don't know, purple, magenta. Now you can see kind of what it does. So anything that falls in the midtones is magenta. Anything on the shadow is red, and anything on the highlight is green. And then it kind of gradates in between there. So that's what the gradient map does. It maps out the highlights and the shadows and all the points in between and applies that gradient at that given point. Now the cool thing with the gradient map is I can use blend modes to create cool effects. So I can do like a soft light if I want to. I can do hard, I don't know, one of the ones that is kind of fun, just doing the color is kind of nice with obvious opacity changes. But there's lots of cool things that you can do with this. You just have to play around a little bit. So it's really good for color effects. However, it's awesome for black and whites. So, oh my gosh, my mouse is out of control. Somebody played with it. It's driving me nuts. Okay, my opacity needs to be at 0. So for a gradient map, you can choose just a simple black to white gradient map, or just a gradient, but you can do other things with it too. Like you can add certain gray points in there if you want, or more black points. You have control over every part of that image. So if my highlight here is getting a little too blown out, I can actually set a gradient point to actually bring down some of the highlights. And I can play with where it falls. I can play with where the mid part of the gradient falls and how that gradient operates. So you actually have a lot of control with the gradient map. If you go in the actual gradient map by clicking the gradient color and maybe setting additional points or just moving some of the colors around to do different things, you actually have quite a bit of control here, and it can be a really, really cool adjustment. There's actually gradient map presets that you can download that are kind of fun. And they're simple. They're just gradients. That's all it is. But it's specifically for gradient mapping, whether it's a color effect or if it's different black and white effects. And they do have some cool black and white gradient maps to download for free if you search a little bit. So they are fun. They're very easy because it's just an adjustment layer. So it's not hard to do in any way, shape, or form. But they are, and again, other adjustment layers have to go with it. So I would need to do some type of curve because I've lost a little bit of my contrast. So I'd have to bring some of that back in. I might need a couple of layers to do that, at least in the lower half. Get rid of it up here. There we go. I'm just adding a couple of curves layers. You can see that just these extra adjustment layers are so important from taking that black and white from flat to a little bit more interesting. And there's a lot of dark areas up here, so I just did a layer mask to eliminate it from the top so that I was adding a little bit more to the bottom. Oops. There we go. So just those 2 layers make a big difference. But the gradient map is so much fun to play with. I might actually bring in some more highlights in these mid-tone areas with that gradient map. So I could go in here and I could actually bring this down a little bit. Maybe I'll add something here. I don't know that that's exactly what I want it to do, but I want... I'm just trying to get these upper areas. It's this area right here. I would probably add a second gradient map and focus on the top, because the top fell in the shadows and the bottom fell in the highlights. With this particular image, it'd be kind of cool to have a second one. Let me add another one here. But then specific to just focusing up here. No. I know what I want to do. I want these two to be like right on top of each other. Whoa. Okay, I don't. I lied. I was wrong. But now I have a little bit more detail up here that I didn't have before. It's just that it's too much for the bottom. So I would completely take that out from down here. Darn it. There we go. That's better. Now I have more interest up there. There we go. So we went from that black and white to that black and white. That's so much better. Except for my curves is a little too much. So this is what you would do with your black and whites, just to try and get it. There we go. Way better. Black and whites are so much fun. But that's all there is to the gradient map, is just adding the adjustment layer, playing with the gradient, and you're good. So it's a very easy way to do it. It's kind of a fun way too, and you have the layer masks for layering your maps too. And if you want to play with it with color, it's a lot of fun. So that one makes sense, right? Hopefully, maybe. These aren't that bad. The one that does confuse people is the color is a channel mixer. So I saved the confusing one to last, and I'm just going to end it at that one. No, the channel mixer is kind of a cool one. Again, it is a layer, or I mean an image adjustment layer. So it is just a layer, but how it operates, you have to kind of wrap your mind around just a little bit. But if you can do it with the black and white adjustment, you can definitely do it here. It's a little bit more mathematical than some of the other conversions. And there's only 3 sliders to use. So I'm going to go back to my original image because I want to show you this one. This is the last one I want to show you. The channel mixer looks like a Venn diagram in the adjustment panel. And it basically is letting you control each color channel individually, but within each color channel. And that's what makes it very confusing. So I don't want to focus on it in color at all because I would lose you guys in about 10 seconds. So I want to focus on it solely from a black and white standpoint. All you have to do in the channel mixer is click the monochrome button at the top to make it black and white. And then basically all you're doing is working with the luminance values of the red, the green, and the blue channels. So it's like using the black and white adjustment sliders. It's just that you're only using these 3 color channels. But the trick is, and again, this is a rule that can be broken, but this one's a little harder to break because you either under or overexpose too quickly if you break it. The trick is these percentages need to equal 100. So if I adjust, and it actually calculates it down here, if I adjust the reds to be a little bit brighter, I've now way overexposed parts of my image and I'm sitting at 137% of my luminance values. So I need to bring down something else and attempt to compensate. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And maybe I just brought this up too much, is trying to get that to equate to 100. But that's the math behind it. Those 3 just have to equal 100. Now, the constant slider at the bottom, you can kind of think of it as a contrast. It's basically the constant between the highlight and the shadow. You really probably will not play with this much. You can pretty much ignore that. You would use it a little bit more in the color version of the channel mixer, not the monochrome version. But the goal is 100%. Now, there are some presets here too, and I really do like the presets that are in here, especially when it comes to landscape photography between like the orange and the green filter. There's a lot of cool things that that preset will do for you. I probably just royally screwed things up here. But there is some fun to be had in there. So it is just 3 channels, just equate to 100. That's the goal. You can actually do the Ansel Adams effect in your images in the channel mixer, probably easier than some of the other techniques that are out there, or I should say faster. Maybe not easier, or maybe not even the best. But I did put in this document, and I linked to a YouTube video too. I finally found it. But there are certain settings that you use using the channel mixer to create the Ansel Adams effect. Again, Ansel Adams did more outdoor landscape photography, so you got to have the right image for it. But it is kind of an infrared type of a thing with the blues. So, you know, if you've ever looked at his images, you know how his signature images were often the landscapes looked like they had snow on them, but it was the middle of summer. So you can create that with these settings. It still equates to 100. You're just going way over. You're doing like 140 for the reds, doing 160 for the greens, and then the blues you're doing a minus 200 so that you get to 100. And what it does, again, this image, it doesn't work the greatest. It probably, you can see it the most in this girl's shirt in the background. What it does is it's inverting the blue colors, basically, is what it does. So this works really good on a landscape image, but all you do is type in those settings and it's done. Probably with a couple like curves, layers and stuff to make it look better, but you're halfway there with these settings. So try it if you have a landscape, see what it looks like. It's really cool. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to dig one up and do it. But you have the key to creating the Ansel Adams effect now. And it's all with the channel mixer. Okay, so I just went whoosh through all of it. But those are, like, what did we do, 7 or 8 different ways? I don't even know. I'm going to save this channel mixer. So all those different ways to create a black and white image are going to create very different results. Some might be similar, like if you did a grayscale or a desaturation, they might be similar. But when you look at all the different versions, so it's really cool to take one image and do all of these different conversions just to see what it looks like. And I'm even just for giggles going to run my action. Oh, that's what I did. I accidentally clicked on something and I couldn't figure out what I did. No, not adjustments. Actions. I got rid of my action palette. Okay, I didn't. Where is it? I'm so confused. Oh. That's what I did. I moved my history palette into its own thing. There we go. Okay, this all makes sense now. All right. I'm going to run this action just because I want to see what it does compared to the other ones. I use this action a lot and I always make adjustments, but this is such a cool action. If you want to spend the money on it, it's from MCP Actions. I love that website. I've gotten my money's worth out of these actions. They have seasonal actions. Let's see, editing, products, Photoshop actions. They had a set of seasonal actions, and it's spring, summer, fall, winter. And they had a good sale. I think it was Thanksgiving. It was probably Black Friday. that they had a sale for. So they have all these seasonal actions, and they're very layerable. So I bought all 4 seasons, and it was a very steep discount because I am cheap and I wouldn't have spent $50 per action. I'm trying to find the whole Essentials collection. No, that's not the one. I want the 4 seasons. Oh my gosh, I bet I passed it already and I'm just not paying attention. So whatever it cost, it didn't matter. I have gotten my money's worth out of it. It was such an awesome set of actions to buy, and that black and white was well worth the price of all 4 seasons just to get this action because I use it all the time. So I saved that. Okay, so now if I compare, here we go. Now if I compare all of them, here's that action that I use all the time. I gotta tell you, I think the gradient map is my favorite one. Just because I was able to map out the ceiling and get a little bit more detail out of it. I think I'm digging the gradient map for this image. But compare them, because then you'll understand what I mean by muddy black and whites. Like this lab mode is kind of muddy. Even the black and white adjustment I did, this desaturate is probably the worst out of all of them. I mean, just compare those 2 next to each other. Looking at the pillars, looking at the detail that's there, and looking how flat the midtones are here. That's what I want you to do with your assignment today. I want you to convert images to black and white using whatever method makes you happy. But I want you to really, really focus on making a good, solid black and white. Because it is not as simple as it seems. There is a lot to look at and think about, especially in mid-tone areas, and not every image is a good black and white. So I want to give you all these methods, so now you have more tools than you will ever need to convert to black and white. You have way more than you will ever need. So all I want you to do is seriously just do black and whites. Where is it? Where is it? Why did it not? Oh, I gotta refresh it. It was hidden. Now it's there. All I want you to do is 10 images in black and white, but I want you to try different methods. So not use the same one for all 10. Try and use at least 4 different methods. So what that does not mean is convert 10 images 4 different ways. Just out of your 10, maybe like 3 use camera raw, 1 uses gradient map, 2 use the black and white adjustment tool. Like just 4 different methods among the 10. So you're still only submitting 10 different images, but just trying 4 different versions between the 10. Now, don't forget, you will probably need the other adjustment layers to make it a better black and white. So that's just the conversion method, but make it good. Do tonal adjustments, curves, levels, or if you're in camera raw, do the tone curve panel and play with that. Do your sharpening techniques that we've talked about. Make it look amazing. I would love for these black and whites to be the ones that replace the images in the hallway. We want to do something that you do throughout the semester. We want to use as the images that get replaced in the hallway. I would love to have an entire wall of black and white images. I think that would be a cool thing. It's probably been a couple of years since we've done the black and white wall, and that was by far the one that people stopped to look at the most, was a solid black and white wall of images. It was so cool. So really pick good images, like portfolio quality images for this, because I would love to make those the printed images on the wall. I'd love to just hold a contest and have you guys select 16 out of all the images that you guys create, and those are the ones we print to go out there. So that's your goal next week, 10 black and white images. That's it. Chapter 5 summary, like you have been doing. It's a short chapter. We've gone through parts of it, and parts of it you already know. And it's very much a screen captured heavy chapter, so there's not as much reading as you think. because I didn't specify pages. It is such a tiny chapter that's full of screenshots. So that's what you're going to do. Does that make sense? You're good?
Yep.
Any questions? Okay, you guys are free. I did it again. 1 minute over.